The moderator adjusted the microphone and looked at the panel. Welcome to tonight's debate between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Judge Glenda Hatchett. We begin with opening statements. Congresswoman Crockett, you have the floor. Thank you. Crockett began, her voice steady but firm. Justice is not an abstract concept. It is the daily reality experienced by millions who enter the system, people whose lives, families, and communities are affected by decisions made in courts every day. From my experience as a public defender and now as a member of Congress, I have seen how the system often fails those it is meant to serve. It disproportionately punishes marginalized communities, leaves victims without closure, and allows inequity to persist unchecked. Our first responsibility is to confront that reality and act boldly to reform it. She continued, there are three main areas where reform is urgently needed: access, accountability, and outcomes. Access means that the law should not be a privilege for the wealthy or well-connected. It must be equally available to all. Accountability requires that judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement operate transparently, with oversight to prevent bias and abuse. Outcomes matter because justice is not just punishment. It is fairness, rehabilitation, and protection of communities. When any of these areas fail, trust in the system erodes and the cycle of inequity continues. The current system demonstrates these failures, Crockett said, leaning slightly forward. Take cash bail, which traps low-income defendants simply because they cannot pay. Consider sentencing disparities that vary by race and class, and think about youth who enter the system and are left without guidance, education, or opportunity. These are not hypothetical problems. They are daily injustices that demand immediate attention. Reform is not about dismantling the system. It is about fulfilling the promise of justice, equality, and fairness. Judge Hatchett rose, her presence commanding but calm. Thank you, she said. I share Congresswoman Crockett's commitment to justice. I also agree that reform is necessary. But from my perspective as a judge, I have seen the consequences of reform implemented without careful planning. The law is a delicate system built on rules, precedent, and procedure. Quick fixes, however well-intentioned, can unintentionally cause harm. Accountability, fairness, and public safety must guide any change. True reform strengthens the system rather than destabilizing it. Hatchett continued, during my tenure as chief presiding judge in a large juvenile court, I witnessed reforms that were implemented hastily, without proper resources or training. They often failed to achieve their goals and sometimes created new inequities. Reform is necessary, yes, but it must be sustainable, ethical, and methodical. Otherwise, we risk losing the trust of the very communities we aim to serve. The moderator interjected, Thank you. Let's discuss systemic accountability and bias. Congresswoman Crockett, bias is not just a theoretical issue. It is lived experience. Crockett said, I have represented individuals who faced incarceration simply because of race or economic status. Pretrial detention, prosecutorial discretion, and sentencing often reflect structural inequities. To address this, we need transparency, oversight, and community involvement. Judges and prosecutors should publicly report key data on bail, charges, and sentencing, while independent bodies monitor for disparities. Reform without accountability is meaningless, and lives continue to be destroyed while we wait for perfect conditions. Hatchett responded, I agree that accountability and transparency are crucial, but oversight alone is not sufficient. Implementation must be measured, data contextualized, and reform accompanied by resources, training, and guidance. Pretrial release decisions, for example, must consider public safety alongside fairness. Programs rolled out without proper planning often fail, eroding trust. My view is that we must balance immediate action with careful deliberation. ensuring that reform strengthens rather than destabilizes the system. Crockett leaned forward. Judge Hatchett, I respect your caution, but delay prolongs injustice. Immediate evidence-based measures like reducing cash bail for nonviolent offenders can save lives while we continue to improve and expand oversight. Waiting for perfection has already cost too many people, families, and communities. Justice delayed is justice denied. Hatchett nodded. And I acknowledge that urgency is important. My concern is ensuring reforms protect both individuals and communities. Fairness, safety, and sustainability must guide every change. Reforms must be methodical, not hasty, to avoid creating new inequities. The moderator signaled a pause. Thank you both. That concludes the discussion on accountability and bias. Next, we will examine sentencing and rehabilitation. The moderator adjusted his notes. Our next topic is sentencing, rehabilitation, and community safety. Congresswoman Crockett, please begin. Crockett leaned forward, her voice resolute. Thank you. When we speak of sentencing, we are addressing one of the most visible failures in the justice system. Too often, incarceration is treated as the default solution, regardless of context or severity. Nonviolent offenders, youth, and first-time defendants are frequently funneled into a cycle of punishment without opportunity for rehabilitation. This approach destabilizes families, perpetuates poverty, and leaves communities weaker. A system that prioritizes punishment over transformation is failing. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Rehabilitation must be central to any sentencing framework. Programs for education, job training, and mental health support reduce recidivism, save public funds, and restore hope to individuals and communities. Sentencing should be proportionate, fair, and accompanied by structured opportunities for reform. This is not leniency, it is strategy. Evidence shows that punitive approaches alone do not prevent crime, but rehabilitation programs do. Crockett's gaze swept the audience. Furthermore, disparities in sentencing continue to reflect systemic inequities. Individuals with financial means often receive lighter sentences or alternative programs, while marginalized communities face harsher outcomes. Accountability and transparency in sentencing decisions are essential. Judges and prosecutors must publish data, and independent monitoring should be the standard, not the exception. Justice must be fair, predictable, and equitable. She continued, we also need to address the upstream causes of crime. Poverty, lack of education, mental health issues, and systemic neglect contribute to cycles of criminal behavior. Community investment, schools, social services, mentorship programs is as much a part of justice as courtroom decisions. Without addressing these root causes, downstream sentencing reforms will be limited in impact. Judge Hatchett nodded, acknowledging the points before speaking. Congresswoman Crockett makes strong points about the importance of rehabilitation and fairness. I agree that reducing unnecessary incarceration and expanding programs for rehabilitation is critical. However, sentencing reform must maintain accountability, ensure public safety, and preserve procedural integrity. When sentences are applied without structure or context, communities and victims may feel unsafe and public trust erodes. She continued, during my time in juvenile court, I observed the risks of implementing reforms without sufficient planning. Programs without oversight or structure often failed, and individuals sometimes returned to criminal behavior due to lack of guidance. Rehabilitation must be paired with monitoring, evaluation, and support. Public safety cannot be secondary to reform. It must be integrated into every policy decision. Hatchett leaned slightly forward. Alternatives to incarceration diversion programs, restorative justice initiatives, and community service are effective when properly executed. but these programs require training, staffing, and accountability. Without these elements, well-intentioned reforms may inadvertently increase risk to the community. Sentencing reform is not a one-size-fits-all process. It must balance compassion with prudence, fairness with safety. Crockett responded, her voice firm. I respect your caution, Judge Hatchett, but waiting for perfect conditions is not acceptable when lives are being harmed now. Immediate reforms like expanding diversion programs, reducing mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenses, and implementing structured rehabilitation can begin today, even as we continue to refine policies and programs. Action does not require perfection. It requires courage, strategy, and oversight. She added, rehabilitation is also about investment in the future. Individuals who receive education, job training, and counseling while in custody or under supervision are far less likely to reoffend. Supporting them benefits communities, reduces recidivism, and builds public trust. Punishment alone does not achieve these outcomes. Reform must be holistic, addressing both the individual and the community. Hatchett nodded slowly. I agree that rehabilitation is crucial. My caution is ensuring that reforms are structured, sustainable, and evidence-based. Programs must include accountability measures, public reporting, and community engagement. Otherwise, we risk creating new inequities or undermining public confidence. Leadership in justice is not just about speed. It is about effectiveness, balance, and fairness. Crockett's tone grew more urgent. Judge Hatchett, I agree with the need for oversight, but urgency cannot be ignored. Each day of inaction perpetuates inequity and harm. By implementing reforms immediately while monitoring outcomes, we can protect communities and restore fairness simultaneously. The goal is not compromise. It is effective, accountable, and equitable action. Hatchett responded, her voice measured. I acknowledge that urgency matters. My concern is ensuring reforms do not create unintended harm. Leadership requires balancing speed with deliberation, vision with structure, and innovation with accountability. Sentencing, rehabilitation, and community safety are interconnected. Changes in one area affect the others. Reform must be holistic, deliberate, and sustainable. Crockett leaned slightly forward, emphasizing her point. We can act decisively while evaluating continuously. Transparency, oversight, and community engagement allow us to implement programs immediately without risking inequity. Delay has already cost lives. Courageous evidence-based action, paired with accountability, is the only path forward. Reform is both moral and practical, and it cannot wait. Hatchett nodded once more. And I acknowledge the need for immediate, thoughtful action. The challenge is ensuring that reforms are effective, ethical, and durable. Justice must serve the individual and the community alike, and that requires deliberate planning and measured implementation. True reform strengthens the system while protecting all stakeholders. The moderator signaled a pause. Thank you both. That concludes the discussion on sentencing and rehabilitation. We will now transition to technology, innovation, and rebuilding public trust. The moderator addressed the panel. Our final topic tonight is the future of justice, including technology, innovation, and restoring public trust. Congresswoman Crockett, your thoughts. Crockett straightened, her expression serious. Thank you. Reforming justice requires that we embrace tools and innovations that can make the system more equitable, transparent, and effective. Too often, the system is opaque, slow, and inaccessible to the very people it is meant to serve. Technology can help us address these challenges, but at the center of every reform must be public trust. Without it, even the most advanced systems fail because people do not believe justice works for them. She continued, one key area is transparency. Judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement should publish data on bail, charges, sentencing, and arrests. This information must be accessible, understandable, and audited by independent bodies. Transparency is not optional. It is essential to restoring confidence in the system. When communities can see decisions and understand the process, they are more likely to trust and engage with the system. Second, Crockett said, technology can assist in decision-making. Predictive analytics and risk assessment tools can help determine who is suitable for pretrial release, diversion programs, or rehabilitative interventions. These tools do not replace human judgment. They support it, helping to reduce bias and inconsistency. Human discretion remains central, but technology allows us to make fairer, evidence-based decisions. She leaned forward. Third, innovation must include community partnerships. Courts alone cannot prevent crime or rehabilitate individuals. Collaboration with social services, educational institutions, mental health professionals, and community organizations is essential. Crime prevention and rehabilitation are systemic responsibilities, and success depends on coordinated efforts across sectors. Fourth, technology can expand access, she added. Virtual hearings, remote legal aid, and mobile applications can reduce barriers for people who cannot physically reach courts or navigate bureaucracy. Justice should meet people where they are, not demand they adapt to an inaccessible system. Crockett emphasized her final point. All of these initiatives must center on rebuilding public trust. Oversight commissions, citizen review boards, and community engagement forums ensure that reform is not just implemented but also accountable. People must see that justice works fairly, consistently, and transparently. When trust is restored, communities are safer, individuals are more empowered, and the system fulfills its purpose. Judge Hatchett nodded thoughtfully. Congresswoman Crockett raises important points about technology and transparency. I agree that innovation can support justice, but it is not a solution in itself. Ethics, proper implementation, and public understanding are critical. Algorithms and predictive tools, if not carefully designed and monitored, can perpetuate biases rather than eliminate them. They must be audited and transparent, and human judgment must always remain central. Hatchett continued, implementation matters. I have seen courts adopt new technology without adequate training for judges, clerks, or attorneys. The result was confusion and delays, undermining trust rather than building it. Technology is a tool, not a replacement for human expertise. It must be integrated thoughtfully, with oversight and structured processes to support outcomes that are fair, ethical, and reliable. She leaned forward. Finally, public engagement is key. Communities must understand how these tools are used and why. People must be able to question decisions, provide feedback, and hold institutions accountable. Without public understanding and buy-in, technology risks eroding trust rather than reinforcing it. Reforms must be transparent, explainable, and inclusive to strengthen confidence in the system. Crockett responded, her voice calm but firm. Judge Hatchett, I agree that oversight, training, and public engagement are critical, but the cost of inaction is far higher. The current system continues to operate with bias, inconsistency, and lack of transparency. Properly applied technology paired with oversight can begin improving fairness immediately. Waiting for perfect conditions allows inequity to persist. Action and accountability can and must proceed together. She added, technology does not replace human judgment, it enhances it. By combining analytics with oversight and community input, we reduce bias, improve consistency, and increase fairness. Transparency ensures that people can see and understand the process, restoring trust that has been lost over decades. The future of justice requires both innovation and accountability. Neither alone is enough. Hatchett nodded, her tone measured. I agree with Congresswoman Crockett. Innovation is necessary, but it must be deliberate, Ethics, oversight, training, and public engagement are essential for reforms to succeed. Technology can support fairness, but it is not a substitute for careful, principled decision-making. The challenge is integrating tools thoughtfully, ensuring that reforms strengthen the system while protecting rights of all parties. Crockett leaned forward, her voice resolute. Judge Hatchett, we share the same goal, a fair, accountable, and trustworthy justice system. I only emphasize that urgency cannot be delayed. The harm of inaction is visible every day. People trapped in cycles of incarceration, communities destabilized, families broken. By applying technology with oversight and transparency, we can act immediately to reduce inequity and restore trust. While continuing to refine and evaluate outcomes, Hatchett nodded once more. And I acknowledge the need for urgency, Congresswoman. My plea is that action be paired with integrity, structure, and evaluation. Leadership in justice requires vision tempered by prudence. Reforms must enhance fairness, safety, and public confidence. When implemented thoughtfully, technology, transparency, and community engagement can transform the system. Acting wisely ensures that justice is not only immediate but sustainable, the moderator summarized. Tonight, we have discussed technology, innovation, and the rebuilding of public trust. Congresswoman Crockett emphasizes immediate, evidence-based reforms enhanced by technology and transparency. Judge Hatchett underscores ethical, deliberate implementation with careful oversight and public engagement. Both perspectives highlight the need to balance innovation, fairness, and trust. Conversation about justice is ongoing, and the future depends on both vision and careful execution. Crockett concluded, the system must act now while continuously improving. Justice is urgent, and reforms must reflect courage, accountability, and fairness. With transparency, oversight, and community engagement, we can make the system smarter, more equitable, and trusted by all. This is the future of justice we must pursue. Hatchett responded, true reform strengthens the system without creating unintended harm. Technology and innovation are tools, but integrity, planning, and accountability must guide their use. Justice must serve both the individual and the community, preserving fairness, safety, and public confidence. The challenge is to act wisely while maintaining urgency. Only then can reform endure and trust be rebuilt.